Hello, my name is Ethan Meyer, and we're going to start the second episode of the Tower Talk podcast. And I'm the director of marketing here at Vertical Consultants, and I'm joined today by Hugh Odom. He's the president and founder of Vertical Consultants, as well as Cell Tower AI. Today, we're going to dive into an episode and discuss just some of the different aspects of cell tower lease rent. And let's get Hugh's take on some of those questions. Hugh, do you have anything you want to start us off with?
Yeah, Ethan, thanks for the introduction. These questions, we're going to try to do a series of podcasts here that go through questions we get asked over the last 15 years, but more particularly, we're getting frequently asked about these things from property owners just like yourself all across the country, all types of situations with one common thing. They either have been approached for a cell tower lease or they have an existing cell tower on their property, and they want to know more about a cell tower agreement. And as Ethan mentioned, we Vertical Consultants, celltowerleaseexperts.com, we provide expertise in determining the value of these sites and also negotiating those agreements. But also one of the great things we've done is we've opened up Cell Tower AI. You can go to celltowerai.com or you can go to Chat GPT, and we are backed by Chat GPT with the only AI that can answer questions basically on Chat GPT that is exclusively for property owners. So we're trying to answer questions for you on these videos, on our website, and also give you instant answers to your questions, backed by data across the country on cell tower leases and over 300 plus cell tower sites on celltowerai.com. But we're going to start with some of the questions that we frequently get asked. And Ethan, take it away.
Yeah. Cell Tower AI was really neat. I've been diving into it, and there's just a wealth of knowledge on there. It helps me just understand some things about all the cell tower leases as well. But anyway, let's get started with the first question here. What's a fair monthly rent for a cell tower on my property?
That is the most frequent question we get asked for the last 15 years, for the last 15 days, for the last 15 hours. And I try to answer it the best. And we on Cell Tower AI, especially, if you enter in your location, your zip code, just enter your zip code, it will give you the rent ranges in your area. But one thing we like to emphasize, and one thing to answer your question more directly, is every cell tower has its own individual value. So you may have a rent range for your city or even your zip code, but that's a range. And that doesn't mean that's the correct value for a new cell tower lease or an existing cell tower lease, because you have to, on your property, but you have to look at the different factors individual to the particular cell tower. And when you get that right, so if I said the rent should be $1,795 per month with a 3% escalator, great. But you also have to structure the lease in a way to make sure you're pulled up as they get more value. So getting the rent right on day one is always important. It's crucial. But getting the structure right keeps you pulled up. It will make a lease worth a certain amount, worth 2 times, 3 times, even more over the life of that lease. So the question should be, what's kind of the range in my area, but how do I get in a lease that gives me today that right value based on my individual property? And also, how do I get a structure that keeps me pulled up as the cell tower makes more money?
Yeah, a lot more to it than just that number.
It is. That's just the starting point. If that's just a indication. But again, they can go to Cell Tower AI, just enter your zip code, your address, and you can start seeing kind of with the approximation, and you'd be amazed what the approximate value is compared to what you're originally offered.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So moving on here, how often should my cell tower rent increase, and by how much?
One of the things we see, especially over the last 2, 3, 4 years, is the rent escalator. And that's kind of what this question is asking about, is how often should my rent increase based upon escalations? And what we're seeing is tower companies trying to get people to agree to a 2%, 1%, or sometimes no escalation. And just to get it correct, you need to at least get a 3% escalator every year. And sometimes people come to us and say, well, they're giving me 15% every 5 years, or they're giving me 10% every 5 years. You don't want to do it over a block of time, like 5 years, because that's the typical term. Every 5 years, they increase your rent. The reason being is that's discounting. Some people say, well, I'm getting 15% over 5 years, so that means it's 3% per year. No, it's not, because it's not compounding every year. It's not 3%, then another 3% on top of that, and so on and so on. So you need to get at least 3% per year. Reason that's important, if you don't keep up with inflation, let's say you start off at $1,500 or $2,000 per month, and you get less than a 3% escalator. Historically, your rent is effectively going down. Your check may be a little bit more, but it's effectively less because inflation is growing at a higher rate. So over a 10, 20, 30, 40-year period, I was just on the phone with somebody, and they've been presented a lease that was going to pay $1,500 a month. But when you start looking at the numbers, and especially the length of the term of the lease, that number was going to be about 1/3 effectively at the end of that lease. That means they're going to be paid about $500 a month effectively because it's basically eroding. So you need to increase every year for the escalators, and you need to keep up with inflation. So at least 3%, or if possible, the other thing real quick is a CPI adjustment that just keeps you up with inflation. But remember, an escalator isn't meant to get you more money per se. It's great if it does with regards to increasing how much money you're getting. It's hopefully going to keep you up with inflation. You need to get, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, you need to get other things at least that keeps you pulled up as the tower company gets more value. And those are subtenant revenue shares, renegotiation points, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like they're almost tricking people with the inflation,
Well,
rate there.
I tell people, I use a lot of little sayings, and people probably get sick of my little sayings and analogies, but I say it's like giving somebody a bucket of water with a hole in it. If you look down at the bucket, you always see the water, but it's leaking out the bottom. And effectively, your rent's always there, but effectively some of it's leaking every year because it's not keeping up with inflation. And by the end of the day, when you end that lease, that bucket is sometimes less than half full. You still have some water in it, you're still getting paid rent, but it's a lot less effectively than you started off with.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So moving on, we got are wireless carriers underpaying me compared to other similar tower sites? How would somebody maybe figure that out?
Sure. So that's a great question because it's not versed in a way. The question isn't what's being paid down the road, because you don't care what's being paid down the road. People contact us all the time, every day for the last 15 years to say, what's the market rent in my area? And their question is basically, what's my next door neighbor down the road getting paid? And that's really not how you do it. The question is a good question because it's comparable situations. So you look at your lease based on a new lease proposal or an existing lease, and you try to look at it compared to other situations. And those situations could be down the road, but they could be all the way across the country based upon what they're building, what they have out there, what tenants are on the tower, how much space they're taking, certain terms of the lease, et cetera, et cetera. So you compare situations. That's why when we talk about cell tower AI, we look over 50,000 plus cell tower agreements and 300,000 plus cell sites, and we look at comparable data. Again, not only based upon what's right down the road, but what's similar. So we look at two, let's say, Crown Castle leases that may be, again, one may be in Nevada, one may be in New Jersey, but they're very similar. So we can see that they're comparable with regards to the value that those should be paid. So that's really how you look at the situation. It's not market rents, it's comparable rents based upon situations. It's not location, it's situation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I talked to a lot of people, and it's like, if the neighbor's severely underpaid, it's not like you want to be getting paid what they've kind of been had. So
yeah,
not a good strategy.
Yeah. It's one of the things for the last 20, 30 years, the tower companies have gotten extremely the best of property owners. So they're more than willing to say, well, the market rents in this area are X, because they're just trying to perpetuate the bad deals. So if you do the deal your neighbor did, you're probably doing a bad deal. Then your neighbor wants to do a deal and they're following you. It's another bad deal. And that just perpetuates. So right. It's kind of one of those things that's just like following the next guy that's jumping off the bridge. You're going to end up in the water. It's not going to be better for you.
Yeah. All right. So what determines how much rent I can charge? Is that like location, height, coverage gap, usage? What comes into play there?
Yeah. So ultimately, it comes down to two things, and all those: location, the network capabilities of the tower, the other options they have in the area to build a new tower, or you have an existing tower. If they say, well, we could relocate it, what really is the cost to relocate, or what would be the network diminishment if they had to move down the road? All those things are very important. But I try to make things basic for me to explain to people. And I always say, you look at any cell tower site and you look at two basic things. What is the value of that one site? Again, nobody else's, of that one site to the tower company. Understand what they're going to get out on day one and what they're going to be able to get out over the life of the lease. You're trying to determine what you are offering them, not so much what they're offering you in the way of rent or other terms. So that's number one. Second thing is a little more difficult. You have to compare what the detriment would be if they couldn't use your property on a new lease. They've come to you and said, hey, we want to lease your property. And you say no. What's the difference between your tower site or proposed tower site and then we're using one down the road? Financially, how much more would it cost them to build down the road? From an operational standpoint, would it be a problem if they had to build down the road, even though it's closed, for diminishment of network capacity, et cetera? So you're looking at what the differences would be, what the diminishment would be. So simply stated, when you're looking at any cell tower site, whether it be a new one or an existing one, you look at what value is being derived today and going forward, and projection going forward, and you look at what the difference is and detriment if they couldn't use your site versus somebody else's.
Right. Yeah. All right. So switching up a little bit here, but can I renegotiate my rent if I think I'm being underpaid?
Yes. And then one of the questions we get is, and one of the things people misunderstand as well, is they say, well, I have 12 years left on my lease. I have 15 years left on my lease. I have 20 years left on my lease. And I'm locked in at this rent. Well, no, you're not. If you understand what you're looking at, and you can look at where the shortfalls for the tower company are under those agreements, then you have ability to go back and renegotiate the lease, because they're going to constantly come to you and try to get certain things they want. But if you understand what they need, because when you're entering into an agreement, if we enter into a new cell tower lease today in 2025, and we made that agreement for 30 years, I couldn't, and the cell tower companies couldn't draft a lease that covers everything they're going to need over the next 30 years. They try to, but eventually they're going to come back to you and have to get something from you. Additional space, additional time, your consent to do something, etc. Then that avails you, if you understand what you're looking at, avails you the opportunity to go back and renegotiate, either from their request of you or being proactive because you see they need something and you can go back to them and offer it to them. Or sometimes they need something because they've already taken it without your permission. And that's another thing people don't need to understand. They need to look at their leases and do a reconciliation of their leases to make sure the tower companies or the wireless carrier isn't, let's say, painting outside the lines of the lease, because what they're going to try to do is get away with that by just not bringing it up. Or when they come to you, they're going to try to get you to sign something that basically gets them a get out of jail free card. So that's not meant to they're malicious and they're trying to take advantage of you. Things happen. They use additional space they're not supposed to be using. They don't get your consent to do something they should have. It just happens. But you need to make sure you take advantage of those opportunities, and that gives you the ability to renegotiate as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's, I guess, always tricky to identify those, what would constitute something to be able to renegotiate in those circumstances. But that's very, very helpful.
Yeah, it's one of the things, Ethan, that I want every property owner to understand. If a property owner usually only has one cell tower lease. Some companies we work with have a dozen. Some we've worked with have a couple hundred. But they still don't see these things enough. That's not their primary focus, where they can look at certain sections of the lease, understand what it's actually saying, and understand how to really make sure they don't sign something in a bad way, but also make sure they can look at it and say, here's an opportunity. That's where Vertical Consultants provides a service to people based upon our expertise. But additionally, if they go to celltowerai.com and you just type in a question, or you go chat GPT at our custom GPT, they can go start asking questions about their lease, and it'll give you some information. They get instant answers. We have every lease backed up in our AI, so they can ask a question about an AT&T lease, a Verizon lease, a T-Mobile lease, whoever, and it'll give you some information through Cell Tower AI. Our job is to combine information, data that we have built out for 15 plus years with our expertise to help people get answers, because that's one of the things they really need, but also get the ability to get representation and consulting services to take advantage of those points that they can use to get a better cell tower lease, not only with regards to how much money they get, but also protecting them and their property.
Right. Yeah. Cell tower AI is great. I mean, you can just anything in there, just ask it a question. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But,
It's really going to be something. I think AI in general is going to be something that changes how people, deal with contracts, in this case, a lease, but you still need that little bit of expertise added on. It's kind of like having a recipe, but you still need the guy that cooks it every day to make it the best it possibly can for any meal.
yeah. So do carriers ever share revenue if they sublease space on a tower?
The quick answer is yes, but with the understanding they hate it. They want, they hate to do it. And here's a couple of things I'll mention real quick. When you're into a new lease, you have an existing lease, you need to get a subtenant revenue share. It's not the only way you can make money from additional tenants being on the tower, but it's the primary. And what I mean by that is if they add, let's say, a tenant on the tower, that happens, you get a certain additional rent based upon that. So you need to have that in any agreement. If not, they're going up by adding tenants. They're making more money, and the value of the tower becomes greater and greater, but your rent effectively stays the same, hopefully, as we talked about before, just with an escalator that keeps you up with inflation. So you want to get that revenue share tied in. But here's a trick you don't want to fall for. Sometimes they'll come to you and say, look, we'll give you a revenue share. We're really nice. We're going to give you a revenue share of $200 per month. Well, they do that as a tactic, as a fallback to give you something. But think about this. If I give you $200 per month and I start that, let's say 5 years from now, when I add a tenant on the tower, it hasn't increased over the 5 years. So effectively that $200 worth less. But let's say, just hypothetically, 5 years from now, I'm charging somebody $2,000 a month to go on the tower. Well, my $200 a month that I'm getting as a property owner is 10%. It's too low. You should get more than 10%. But let's say they add another carrier up there 5 years later, and they say, here's your additional $200. Well, again, the $200 is not increased over that additional 5 years because it's not increasing with inflation. But also now, if I'm getting $4,000 a month from a carrier to go on the tower, my $200 only represents 5%. So always get a revenue share, but understand you have to get it structured in a certain way where it makes sense. The cell tower companies play this game every day, so they understand what they don't want you to get, but they also understand how to give you things, and it looks okay, but it really isn't as much as you should be getting.
Right. Yeah, I guess to follow up on that, kind of similar question here, but can I charge more if multiple carriers are using my property?
Yes. So here's 2 quick points on that. If you have a revenue share on an existing lease, you should be getting additional revenue, additional rent for those subtenants. But the other way to do that, and you need to get that in any new lease, and you need to negotiate if you renegotiate an existing lease, you need to get revenue for those additional tenants as well. The other way is, and not so common, is when you originally give up a lease on a new lease, don't give too much ground space. The traditional ground space is about 10,000 square feet on a cell tower. So if somebody goes and builds a cell tower tomorrow and they have 10,000 square feet, they're going to have about half, if not two-thirds of that property, that 10,000 square feet not being used. They're doing that. The tower company's doing that because they don't have to come back to you to get additional square footage, because all they're going to do with that additional square footage is not one thing, but what they're going to do to improve it. They're going to lease that additional square footage out to an AT&T, Verizon, and they're going to make money off your property, not doing one thing, because every time somebody goes on the tower, they'll need additional ground space on the ground, and you've given them that additional ground space, and they're going to make money off your property. So you need to, the basic point is, you need to limit how much space you give them initially. Plus, if they need additional space, you need to understand the value of that additional space to the tower company. And also the other thing is, it's not only how much space you give them, but how you configure the space as well. That's a little more complicated, but it's understanding these little points that change the good lease, or turns a bad lease into a good lease into a great lease, and a great lease into something that just makes you a lot of money over the life of the term.
Yeah, it's amazing how just little differences can really add, those escalators and things, just adds up a lot over time. But
yeah, that's why every cell tower company fights over every dollar. I want to make this point real quick, is that people think, well, hold on, we're just talking about revenue share, escalators, whatever. On average, every $1 of rent, $1 equals a value about $1,000 for that cell tower lease. So over the life of that lease, if you're a 30 plus, right around 30 years, that $1 additional rent means that your cell tower lease is worth an additional $1,000. So it's just the opposite on the other side. They're fighting for that dollar. The tower companies, they're trying to keep every dollar on their side of the equation, because that means more value for their tower and more money for them. So this is just, you know, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a balance between the two and make sure that you get every dollar out of this. And even though some people say, well, it's only, you know, $100 more or whatever, that $100 is $100,000. And so we try to get people to think bigger. And that's why when you go into vertical consultants, or more particularly cell tower AI, you start asking these questions about what's the difference between $800 a month in rent and $1,200 a month in rent at a 3% escalator over 50 years. You'll be amazed. And that's not even putting into the equation revenue shares and et cetera that you can renegotiate. You can turn a good lease into a great lease if you understand not what the rent should be, but what the structure of the cell tower lease should be.
Yeah. So, shifting here, is a long-term monthly rent better, or a one-time buyout, lease buyout?
Yeah, I would say 95+% of the time, long-term rent is better. People contact us and they say somebody's offered me, and property owners with existing leases constantly get contacted and saying, I want to buy your lease. I want to buy your lease. And I always say nobody contacts you to buy something if there's not more value in it for them than what they're offering to you. But unless there's just certain situations, we are not advocates of people selling their cell tower lease. There could be certain situations by which you need the money, or you can reinvest the money, or you're trying to hedge against the tower going away, which is a very small percentage of a tower ever going away. But you should always try to hold on to the rent, because it is a passive revenue source if you structure the lease correctly. So if you're offered a situation, sometimes you see this in new cell tower leases as well. They say, well, I'll pay you $1,000 a month, or I'll give you a one-time fee of $100,000 for a 99-year lease. Do not take the $100,000. It is trying to get you to fix their cost over that 99-year period. Take the rent. The rent always equates to more money long-term, plus it increases in value. So long story even longer, do not sell your lease unless you get a tremendous amount of value for it, and it just fits a certain set of circumstances. If they're trying to buy it, because again, no one comes to you and wants to buy a cell tower lease unless there's more advantage to them and they're not undervaluing your lease.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think we might have found the answer to the next question, but maybe don't sell your lease. But what's the biggest financial mistake property owners can make in their leases?
Well, I think, like you said, selling it and undervaluing it, because I think, again, that's a huge thing we see, because there's so many companies out there contacting property owners to get them to sell their leases. And it's tough because they're selling money. But the biggest mistake, financial mistake beyond that, I think even in addition to that, or maybe bigger than that, is what I kind of mentioned before, and not to be overly repetitive, is property owners focus on rent. We tell property owners to focus on the entire lease plus structure. The reason being, I'll say this, is if I came to any property owner today and said, look, I'll offer you $10,000 a month in rent, a 3% escalator. I'll give you 40% of every subtenant I add up there. I have one-page lease. It's three conditions. They'd want to know my 3 conditions before they sign the lease. But people look at this and they look at a long lease that's 20, 30 pages, and they're trying to figure out rent before they understand the rest of the lease. So first thing you need to do when you get a cell tower lease is understand what you're agreeing to. Then you can try to go backwards and try to figure out what you need to get out of it. And then when you figure out what you need to get out of it, rent, that's not where you stop. You've put in a structure to make sure that you get the rent right today, and you're pulled up as the value of the tower goes up in value for the tower company. What we try to do is make sure people understand that rent is not financial structure. Rent is the derivative. It's the result. So just for an example, here's kind of like a case study that I'll put out there. We have a property owner in Ohio, and they have a lease that we renegotiated, and they were getting paid around $900, and we increased that to around $2,000 per month. This was about 8 years ago. And that sounds great. They more than doubled their rent, and they got a nice signing bonus, and et cetera. But we structured a lease to make sure that as that tower got more valuable, they kept on getting more and more money. Well, here we are 8 years later, and that $2,000 is over $6,000 per month. Now, if they had just thought, well, how much money should I get? How much rent should I get? They would have got their $2,000 and the 3% escalator, and they'd probably be making around $2,700, $2,800 a month in rent compared to $6,000 plus, because they structured a lease. They just didn't agree to a rent. And the biggest financial mistake people make is they're too short-sighted with trying to focus on rent. It's not their fault. It's because the cell tower companies want you to just focus on the rent. We're trying to get people to think a lot bigger to not only get more money, but also protect themselves as well. And that's where, when you go to Vertical Consultants or on our website, or you go to Cell Tower AI, you can start asking questions about this. You can start typing in these questions about what you should be looking out for in certain red flag terms of a lease and how to structure revenue share and things of that nature. We are trying to put information out there to help property owners get a better lease in correspondence with us being able to provide data, but also provide expertise as well through Vertical Consultants.
Yeah, that's it's tricky. I mean, people, it's like seeing the forest through the trees. You got to really see what you're missing out on there. But anyway, so the next question comes down to, if my tower rent started years ago, how much value would I have lost to inflation?
Well, it kind of goes back to the question on rent escalator. So you can have a lease depending on how long it is. That's another thing cell tower companies do. They try to get you to agree to a very long-term lease. I was looking at a lease this morning, and they're asking for 90 years. So if you start looking at that and you start saying, well, they're going to pay me a 1% escalator and inflation's on average 3%, and you start doing the math over 90 years, that lease was starting out at approximately, I think it was starting out around $1,200 a month, somewhere around that range. And by the time the lease was done, they were effectively going to be making about $159 per month. That means that's how much they had lost in value, and they weren't offered a revenue share or anything else. So, I mean, that's how much it's just compounding. It's just that leaky bucket example I said earlier. It just becomes less and less. And property owners just are kind of suspect to that by not understanding that they need to get certain levels of escalations just to keep up with inflation. An escalator is, in my mind, not a rent increase. It hopefully is an inflationary adjustment. It'd be like me telling somebody, I want you to work for me for the next 50 years. And on average, inflation is going to increase by 3% per year, but I'm going to increase your salary by 1% per year for the next 50 years. Well, heck, by the time you're done working for me, you'll be in a bad situation financially because I'm not keeping up with living wage. And that's what the tower companies do. They try to get the rent at a certain level, but it effectively goes down every year because they're not keeping up with inflation.
Right. Yeah. I can't think of any billionaires 20, 30 years ago, but as inflation goes, people make more money. Anyway, I think that wraps it up here. Anything else you'd like to close us out here with?
Yeah, I guess again, these are things that we're trying to do these podcasts, our tower talk. And if you will leave a comment in the down below in the YouTube, if you haven't, we're talking about tower talk, tower time, some different names. If you have any questions or you have any comments on what we said, we're always happy to answer those in the comments, and always happy if you subscribe to the Vertical Consultants YouTube channel. But again, we're trying to get information out to property owners. We always try to do that. We're trying to combine information with expertise. And that's where the information part of this, again, we're trying to be powered by an AI model with 300,000+ cell sites and 50,000+ cell tower agreements as a database. And we're constantly growing that to give people information. We're not trying to say, well, pay us and we'll give you some information. We're making it publicly available. You can go on Chat GPT and go to our custom GPT. You can go to, which is has a link down in the description. You can go to celltowerai.com. It pops up. Ask it a question. Ask it another question. Ask it another question. It'll give you an instant answer. And there's no one else out there doing that. And people may say that, well, that's crazy. You're just giving away this stuff for free. We're trying to build trust for property owners to give them information because they've been at the negative side of this for years because the tower companies have a lot of information they don't want out there. And we're trying to get that out there so the property owner can not only get more money, which is always important, but they can protect themselves and their property. So we'll hopefully get some more of these podcasts out, answer questions, and get some good information for property owners around the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, Cell Tower AI can just answer questions before before maybe even they reach out to us. They could solve what they're looking for. Getting that answer in order to just contact us, and reach out to us, perhaps. It drives it into where they know what they're looking for a little bit more, having those questions answered.
Yeah, it's something we're just putting out there for anybody. Cell Tower AI is trying to answer questions. It's also trying to show you our expertise because we have the data and we're combining data. And what we're trying to do here is not only help property owners and individual property owners, but if you're an attorney, you're an accountant, you're a real estate agent, you're a lender, you're a appraiser, whatever, we're trying to make information available to you and your clients so you can make the best judgments calls for your clients if you're an attorney or if you're an accountant or whatever the case may be. We're trying to get information in a mass level because look, the cell tower industry isn't shrinking, it's always growing, and there's always opportunity, but there's always issues. And we've learned over the years that people don't have enough information to make good decisions because again, most times they're only dealing with this once or twice in their lifetime. And they're trying to go up against companies that do this every day. So we're not only trying to level the playing field, we're trying to turn it upside down. You may see on my shirt here, my pullover and Ethan's shirt, we have our new logo that we're going to be releasing here by the end of the year on our website. But basically, we've already got the merch, and it's the V for vertical consultants. But ultimately, what we're saying is we're taking a cell tower and turning it upside down. We're taking the industry and turning it upside down. So what we're trying to do is back property owners and their advisors with information, and then we can provide expertise as well. So always happy to get those things out there.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Hugh. I think that about wraps it up for today. If there's anything else you want to add, go ahead.
Nope. Thanks everybody. And have a great day and contact us if we can help you in the future.